He was a millionaire surrounded by luxury, but he couldn't sleep a single night in peace. Until one day he hired a young woman to lie beside him just to be silently present. What he didn't know was that this woman would be the only one capable of healing the wounds that money had never reached. At 26, Valerie had developed the habit of starting her day on tiptoe, trying not to make noise in the small two-bedroom apartment she shared with her mother. The smell of fresh coffee spread through the kitchen as she prepared breakfast with her usual care, even knowing that the days were getting increasingly difficult. It was a routine she had kept for years, ever since her mother, Carmen, had discovered her heart problems and needed special care. That Tuesday morning, the white envelope on the kitchen table seemed to scream for attention. Valerie knew exactly what was inside. Another overdue electricity bill, adding to the other bills she had been putting off for weeks. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened the paper and saw the final amount with accumulated interest, $340, which she simply didn't have. Her nurse's salary from the public hospital barely covered her mother's medicines and the apartment rent. And now, without the job she had lost the previous week, the situation was even more complicated. "Good morning, my dear." "You're up early again?" said Carmen, appearing at the kitchen door in the floral robe Valerie had given her for Mother's Day. The 62-year-old woman still maintained the sweet smile that always calmed her daughter's heart, even in the hardest times. "You didn't have to make coffee. You know I can do these things myself." Valerie forced a smile and poured coffee into her mother's favorite cup, the one with blue flowers they had bought at a street fair many years ago. "I like taking care of you, Mum. Besides, you need to save your energy for what really matters." What Valerie didn't say was that taking care of her mother was the only thing that still made sense in her life, especially after being fired from the hospital along with 15 other employees due to budget cuts. The phone rang just as Valerie was washing the coffee cups. It was Monica, her best friend since nursing school, who worked at another hospital in the city. "Val, I have some bad news and—" Some good news," Monica said, straight to the point as always. "The bad news is that St. Luke's Hospital is also cutting staff, so I can't get you a referral here as I promised. The good news is, I saw a very strange ad in the paper today, but it pays really well." Valerie's stomach tightened at the first part of the news, but curiosity about the ad took over. "What kind of strange ad, Monica?" Her friend took a few seconds to answer, as if rereading something. "It's for a nighttime caregiver for an executive. It says it's just to be present during his sleep period. No actual nursing duties required. The salary is $15,000 a month." Valerie almost dropped the cup she was drying. $15,000. That was more than she earned in 4 months at the public hospital. "Monica, that can't be serious. What kind of person pays $15,000 just for someone to sit next to them while they sleep?" The question echoed in the kitchen, and Carmen looked at her daughter curiously. "I don't know, Val, but the ad looks legitimate. It even has the company's registration number and everything. It's some big business group from what I saw. They ask you to email a resume and schedule an interview." Valerie jotted down all the information her friend gave her, though she still found it too strange to be true. After hanging up, she stared at the paper with the ad's details for several minutes, wondering if it was really worth trying. The afternoon passed slowly, with Valerie taking care of her mother and trying not to think too much about the ad. But when Carmen had a small bout of shortness of breath after lunch, and Valerie had to rush to get the emergency medication, reality hit hard. The medication was running out and she had no money to buy more. Her mother's health insurance only covered part of the treatment, and the most expensive drugs were left to the family. "Mom, are you feeling better now?" Valerie asked, holding the hand of the woman who had raised her alone after her father left when she was just a child. "I am, dear. It was just a scare, but I can tell you're worried about something. Want to talk to me?" Valerie looked into those loving eyes and decided she could no longer hide their financial situation from her mother. "Mom, I lost my job at the hospital last week. They cut several people because of the crisis, and I was among the last hired." Valerie spoke in a low voice, trying to hide the desperation she felt inside. "I didn't want to tell you before because I didn't want you to worry, but we have several overdue bills and I need to find another job right away." Carmen squeezed her daughter's hand tighter and smiled in that way she always did when she wanted to convey calm. "My daughter, you have always been a fighter. Since you were little, when things got tough, you always found a way to solve everything. I trust you and I know we will get through this together, just as we've always gotten through everything in our lives." The conversation with her mother gave Valerie the courage she needed to make a decision that would completely change the course of their lives. That night, after Carmen was asleep, Valerie turned on the old computer she used for studying and began to write an email to the company from the ad. "I have 5 years of experience as a registered nurse. I am responsible, discreet, and understand the importance of caring for people who need special attention," she typed, trying to sound professional, even without fully understanding what the job really entailed. "I am available to start immediately and have complete schedule flexibility." After rereading the email about 10 times, she took a deep breath and hit the send button, never imagining that her message would reach a man who hadn't had a single night of peaceful sleep in years, and that this simple act would change both of their lives forever. The reply came the next morning with a speed that surprised Valerie. The email was formal and direct, asking her to come to an address in the city's most affluent neighborhood that very afternoon at 3 o'clock. "Please bring personal documents and be prepared for an interview of approximately 30 minutes, the message said, signed only by Human Resources Department Mitchell Group. Valerie quickly searched for the company online and discovered it was one of the largest corporate groups in the country, specializing in luxury real estate. The name Gabriel Mitchell appeared as president and founder, but information about him was limited. Just a few photos at social events, where he always appeared with a serious and distant expression. The bus ride to the upscale district took almost an hour, and Valerie used the time to mentally review everything she knew about nighttime care and assisting people with sleep difficulties. She had worn her best professional outfit, a navy blue suit she only used for special occasions, and carried a folder with copies of all her documents and nursing certificates. The closer the bus got to her destination, the more nervous she became, especially because she still couldn't understand why someone would pay so well just for company during sleep. Maybe it's some kind of psychological issue or phobia, she thought, trying to prepare herself for any situation she might encounter. The mansion was on a tree-lined street, where every house looked like a palace. The black iron gate opened automatically after Valerie identified herself on the intercom, revealing an impeccably manicured garden and a 3-story house with modern, elegant architecture. A man in a dark suit greeted her at the main door and led her through hallways decorated with expensive paintings and furniture that looked like it came from a design magazine. "Mr. Mitchell will see you in his private office," the man said, knocking gently on a dark wooden door before opening it. "You may go in, please." Valerie took a deep breath, smoothed the skirt of her suit, and entered the room, unaware that she was about to meet the man who would completely change the course of her life. Gabriel Mitchell was standing behind a huge desk, looking out the window that overlooked the pool and the backyard garden. When he turned to greet her, Valerie was surprised by his appearance. She had imagined an older man, but Gabriel looked to be around 35, with brown, always well-groomed hair and intense blue eyes that seemed to see right through people. He wore a dark grey suit that emphasized his elegant posture, but there was something in his expression that conveyed coldness and distance, as if he were constantly on guard against the world. "Miss Santos, thank you for coming." "Please sit down," he said, indicating a leather armchair in front of the desk. His voice was deep and controlled, showing no particular emotion. "I'll be direct with you, as I don't have time to waste beating around the bush," Gabriel began, sitting in his chair and lacing his fingers on the desk. "I have a medical problem that has affected my sleep for many years. I have consulted dozens of specialists, taken every type of medication, and nothing works effectively. Recently, I discovered that I can rest better when someone is present in the room during the night." Valerie listened silently, trying to process the information and understand where she would fit into this situation. "The job basically consists of staying by my side during my sleep period from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. You would lie on the bed, clothed, obviously, merely offering your presence. There is no physical contact of any kind. There is no conversation during the work period, and absolute discretion is required regarding anything that might happen or be said during this time. Valerie felt her face heat up at the explanation. The situation was even stranger than she had imagined, but at the same time it didn't seem to involve anything inappropriate or dangerous. Mr. Mitchell, may I ask why a nurse specifically? Wouldn't it be more appropriate to seek a mental health professional or something similar? Gabriel observed her for a few seconds before answering, as if assessing whether she could handle the situation. I have tried psychologists, psychiatrists, sleep therapists, every kind of professional imaginable. What I need isn't treatment. It's simply someone qualified to handle medical emergencies if necessary, and who understands the importance of medical confidentiality. He leaned back in his chair and continued. Besides, nurses are accustomed to unconventional situations and know how to maintain professional discretion. The salary is $15,000 per month, paid on the 5th business day of each month. There will be a 2-week trial period, during which either you or I can terminate the agreement without prior notice, Gabriel explained, handing Valerie a document that looked like a contract. If we choose to continue after the trial period, the contract will be for an indefinite term, with the possibility of termination by either party with 30 days' notice. Valerie quickly leafed through the paper, seeing clauses about confidentiality, work hours, and responsibilities. Everything seemed legitimate and legally well structured. I need to think about this, Mr. Mitchell. It's a very different situation from anything I've done in my career. Gabriel nodded as if he expected this response. I understand perfectly, but I need an answer by noon tomorrow. If you accept, we start tonight. When Valerie left the mansion, her head was spinning with all the information and possibilities. $15,000 would solve all her family's financial problems and even allow her to pay for better health insurance for her mother. On the other hand, the situation was truly unusual, and she wasn't sure if she could adapt to sleeping next to a stranger, even if it was just work. During the bus ride home, she weighed all the pros and cons, thinking of her mother, who needed the expensive medicines and the bills piling up on the kitchen table. When she finally arrived at the apartment, Carmen was preparing lunch and immediately noticed that something important had happened. How was the interview, dear? By the look on your face, it was very different from what you expected. Valerie told her mother everything, except for the more specific details about sleeping in the same bed, and waited for the reaction of the woman who had always advised her in life's difficult moments. Carmen listened to her daughter's entire explanation in silence, slowly stirring the beans on the stove while processing every word. When Valerie finished telling her about the proposal, her mother turned around with that wise look that only women who have raised daughters alone can have. My daughter, I've lived long enough to know that sometimes opportunities appear in formats we don't expect. If this man were dangerous or had bad intentions, he wouldn't make such a clear and direct proposal. She dried her hands on the dishcloth and sat in the chair next to Valerie. Besides, you're a nurse, you know how to take care of yourself, and you have experience with all kinds of situations. I trust your judgment, and I know you'll make the right decision for both of us. Her mother's words brought the relief Valerie needed to finally decide to accept the proposal that would change their lives. In the early evening, Valerie called the number Gabriel had given her and confirmed that she accepted the job. His voice sounded even more formal over the phone, giving precise instructions on how to proceed. You should arrive at 10:30 p.m. Michael, my employee who received you today, will orient you on the procedures. Bring comfortable clothes to sleep in, but nothing inappropriate or revealing. Pajamas or workout clothes are appropriate. After hanging up, Valerie packed a small bag with a few changes of clothes, toiletries, and a book, in case she needed a distraction during the adjustment period. She kissed her mother on the forehead, promised to send messages to reassure Carmen, and left to face her first day at the strangest job she had ever accepted. The mansion at night had a completely different atmosphere. The soft lights in the gardens created mysterious shadows, and the silence was broken only by the sound of a fountain Valerie hadn't noticed during the day. Michael met her at the side door of the house, explaining that this would always be her entry and exit point. "Mr. Mitchell is finishing some work in the office. He asked me to show you the room and explain how everything works here at night." The employee led her up a marble staircase to the second floor, stopping in front of a double door of light-colored wood. "This is the master bedroom. Inside there is a private bathroom that you can use when you need to. Mr. Mitchell is very punctual and always goes to his room at 11 o'clock sharp." The room was impressive, with a king-size bed that looked like it could easily accommodate 4 people. The walls were painted in neutral shades of beige and grey, with some modern art pieces that gave sophistication to the environment. A comfortable armchair was near the window, along with a small table where Valerie could leave her personal belongings. "Mr. Mitchell always sleeps on the right side of the bed. You should lie on the left side, maintaining a respectful distance. He usually takes between 15 and 30 minutes to fall asleep, and during this time, he may seem restless or anxious." Michael spoke naturally, as if he were explaining something completely normal. "Once he falls asleep, you should remain in bed until 6 a.m. If for any reason you need to get up during the night, please make as little noise as possible." At 11 o'clock sharp, Gabriel entered the room wearing simple navy blue cotton pajamas. He greeted Valerie with a nod without making direct eye contact and went straight to the bathroom for his nightly routine. Valerie took the opportunity to change as well, putting on a pair of light pink long-sleeved pajamas she had bought especially for the occasion. When Gabriel came out of the bathroom, she noticed that he avoided looking in her direction, keeping his eyes fixed on the floor or the wall. "Good night, Miss Santos. I hope you can rest well," he said in a low voice, lying down on his side of the bed and pulling the cover up to his chest. Valerie replied softly, "Good night, Mr. Mitchell," and lay down too, keeping a safe distance between them. The first few minutes were intensely uncomfortable. Valerie could feel the tension in Gabriel's body, who moved constantly, adjusting the pillow and changing positions several times. She kept her eyes closed, breathing slowly and trying to relax, but she was completely alert to his every move. She could hear Gabriel's irregular breathing, who was clearly struggling to fall asleep. "Does he always take this long?" she thought, trying to calculate how much time had passed since they lay down. After what seemed like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, his breathing finally began to slow down and deepen. Valerie waited a few more minutes to be sure he was really asleep before allowing herself to relax a little. During the first night, Valerie barely slept. Every time Gabriel moved or made a noise during his sleep, she became alert, ready to act if necessary. He spoke a few mumbled words while sleeping, nothing very clear, but she realized he seemed to be having agitated dreams. Around 3 a.m., Gabriel had what seemed to be a nightmare, moving his arms and muttering something about not being able to get there in time. Valerie was unsure whether to wake him or not, but decided to just observe. After a few minutes, he calmed down naturally. When his alarm went off at 6 a.m., and she pretended to be asleep as he got up and went to the bathroom, leaving the room a few minutes later without saying a word. The following nights followed a similar pattern, but Valerie began to notice small details about Gabriel that she hadn't perceived on the first day. He always checked if the doors were locked before getting into bed, fiddled with his phone for exactly 5 minutes, and always drank a glass of water that was on the bedside table. During his sleep, he constantly turned towards the side where she was, as if unconsciously seeking her presence. On the 5th night, something different happened. Gabriel woke up startled around 2 a.m. with rapid breathing and sweat on his forehead. Valerie pretended to be asleep, but she could see him sit on the edge of the bed and stay there for several minutes with his head in his hands. When he finally lay down again, he murmured softly, "Thank you for being here," thinking she couldn't hear. It was in that moment that Valerie began to understand that the work she was doing was much more important than she had imagined. The second week brought a more established routine, but also revelations that Valerie had not expected. Gabriel seemed slightly more relaxed during the first few minutes before sleep, sometimes even commenting on the weather or asking if she was comfortable. During the day, She took the opportunity to research sleep disorders and discovered that some childhood traumas could indeed cause chronic insomnia that persisted into adulthood. The more she read about the subject, the more convinced she became that Gabriel carried some kind of deep emotional wound that affected his ability to rest alone. It must be very difficult to live like this for so long, she thought, observing the dark circles he tried to hide with makeup during the work meetings she sometimes witnessed when she arrived early at the mansion. It was on a rainy Tuesday that everything changed. Gabriel was particularly restless that night, moving more than usual and breathing irregularly, even after apparently falling asleep. Around 1 a.m., he began to thrash lightly, murmuring words that Valerie couldn't completely understand. She paid close attention, trying to catch what he was saying, when suddenly he shouted, "Mommy, don't go!" in a voice that sounded like a frightened child. The cry was followed by low sobs, and Gabriel curled into a fetal position, clearly reliving some traumatic moment from the past. Valerie felt her heart ache seeing that powerful, intimidating man transformed into a vulnerable child, terrified by his own dreams. Without thinking too much, Valerie carefully extended her hand and lightly touched Gabriel's arm, whispering softly, "It's okay, you're safe now." The touch seemed to calm him immediately, and he stopped thrashing, although he remained asleep. She kept her hand on his arm for a few minutes, feeling the tension in his body gradually decrease until he returned to breathing peacefully. What could have happened to him in his childhood, she wondered, carefully withdrawing her hand once she was sure Gabriel was calm again. The rest of the night passed without further incidents, but Valerie lay awake, thinking about what she had witnessed and how that seemingly cold man carried such deep pain. The next morning, Gabriel woke up as usual, but Valerie noticed that he looked at her for a few extra seconds before getting out of bed. During breakfast, which she ate alone in the kitchen while he got ready for work, Michael came to talk to her. "Have you noticed any difference in Mr. Mitchell's sleep since you started working here?" Valerie chose her words carefully, respecting the confidentiality the job required. "He seems to rest better than I imagined possible, but sometimes he has nightmares that seem very intense." Michael nodded with a knowing expression. "Mr. Gabriel went through very difficult things when he was a child. He lost his parents very young, and since then he's never been able to sleep properly alone. We've tried everything, doctors, medicine, therapies, but nothing worked until you arrived." Michael's revelation explained a lot about Gabriel's behavior. Losing his parents in childhood would certainly leave deep trauma, and the difficulty sleeping alone made sense in that context. "Who did he live with after his parents died?" Valerie asked, trying to better understand the story. "With his paternal grandparents, but they were very strict and cold people. They treated Mr. Gabriel more like a duty than a beloved grandson. He learned from a young age not to show weakness or emotional needs." Michael lowered his voice as if revealing an important secret. "That's why he's so closed off to everyone, but since you started working here, even the staff has noticed that he's less irritable during the day. It's like he's finally managing to get real rest." That night, Valerie paid even more attention to the details of Gabriel's behavior. She noticed how he double-checked that the door was locked, how he drank water in small, nervous sips before lying down, and how his eyes always did a quick scan of the room before closing. These were the behaviors of someone constantly living in a state of high alert, always expecting something bad to happen. When they finally lay down, Gabriel was silent for a few minutes before speaking softly, almost whispering. "Miss Santos, may I ask you a personal question?" Valerie turned slightly towards him, surprised by his initiative to talk. "Of course, Mr. Mitchell." He took a few seconds to continue, as if gathering courage. "Do you have a family? People you love, and who love you back?" The question caught Valerie off guard, but there was something in Gabriel's voice that indicated this was important to him. "I have my mother. She's the most important person in my life. We've taken care of each other ever since my father left when I was a teenager." Gabriel was silent for so long that she thought he had fallen asleep, but then he spoke again, his voice even lower. "It must be nice to have someone who cares if you're okay or not, someone who worries when you're late coming home." There was a deep sadness in those words that made Valerie's heart ache. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm sure there are people who care about you too. Maybe they just don't show it in the way you'd like." Gabriel turned his face towards her in the dark, and even without being able to see clearly, Valerie felt the weight of his gaze. "No, Miss Santos. I've built a life where no one gets close enough to truly care, and until recently I thought I preferred it that way." The silence that followed was different. It wasn't just the absence of conversation, but a moment of genuine connection between two people who were beginning to know each other beyond their professional roles. Valerie understood that Gabriel had just opened a small window to his soul, showing the loneliness he carried behind the facade of a successful businessman. "Sometimes people come into our lives when we least expect them," she said softly, "and they change things we didn't even know needed changing." Gabriel didn't reply, but she could feel that he was truly listening to every word. That night he fell asleep more quickly than usual, and for the first time since she started working there, Valerie also managed to sleep deeply, feeling that something important was beginning to develop between them, something that went far beyond a simple professional agreement. The following weeks brought small changes that only someone very observant would notice. Gabriel started arriving in the room a few minutes early, sometimes commenting briefly on how his day had been, or asking if Valerie needed anything to be more comfortable. He had Michael buy special pillows for back pain when he learned she sometimes woke up with minor discomfort, and he installed a small lamp on her side of the bed so she could read before sleep if she wanted. "They're just adjustments to improve work efficiency," he explained, when Valerie thanked him for the improvements. But there was something in his voice that suggested more personal motives behind the gestures. During the day, when Valerie wasn't at the mansion, Gabriel found himself thinking about details about her that had nothing to do with the job. How she always smelled faintly of lavender, probably from the soap she used. How her brown hair fanned out on the pillow when she slept, creating soft waves that he discreetly watched in the early morning hours before getting up. How she whispered good night softly every evening, with a voice that conveyed a sincerity and warmth he wasn't used to receiving from anyone. These observations confused him, because for years he had convinced himself that he didn't need emotional connections with other people to be happy. Michael and the other house staff began to comment among themselves about the changes in their boss's behavior. Gabriel no longer yelled at the gardeners when a leaf was out of place. He no longer fired employees for small mistakes that used to irritate him deeply. He had even started greeting people with "good morning" instead of just a nod. "Ever since that nurse started working here, Mr. Gabriel has become a different person," the cook commented to Michael while preparing lunch. "He even smiled yesterday when the neighbor's dog barked during his meeting, before he would have complained to the homeowners association." Michael agreed, watching through the window as Gabriel talked on the phone with a patience he hadn't shown in months. Valerie also noticed the changes, not only in Gabriel's behavior, but in her own routine and feelings. She had started to get ready with more care before going to the mansion, choosing her prettiest pajamas and fixing her hair, even knowing she was just going to sleep. When she got home in the morning, Carmen always asked how the night had been, and Valerie found herself sharing details about Gabriel that went beyond what was necessary to reassure her mother. "He's much kinder than he seems," she explained one morning while helping Carmen take her medicine. "During the day he has to be firm because of his job, but at night he's a completely different person, more human, more real." One Thursday, something happened that shifted the dynamic between them even more. Carmen fell ill during the afternoon, with chest pains that left Valerie terrified. She called her mother's doctor, who told her to take her to the hospital immediately for some tests. At the emergency room, they discovered that Carmen would need to be admitted for a few days to adjust her medication and for more intensive cardiac monitoring. Valerie called Gabriel, explaining that she couldn't work that night because she needed to stay at the hospital with her mother. To her surprise, he replied that he understood perfectly and asked if she needed any help. "Thank you, Mr. Mitchell, but we're managing everything," she replied, touched by the genuine concern in his voice. 2 hours later, Michael appeared at the hospital carrying a basket with fruit, flowers, and some toiletries. "Mr. Gabriel sent these things for your mother." And he said to give you this as well, he explained, handing an envelope to Valerie. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a handwritten note. To cover your mother's medical expenses, consider it an advance on your salary. I hope she recovers soon. Gabriel. Valerie was speechless, holding the paper and feeling her eyes fill with tears. It was far more than she would earn that month, and his generosity caught her completely off guard. When Carmen saw the flowers and heard about the check, she smiled that wise way she always did, when she understood something Valerie hadn't yet realized. My daughter, this man isn't just being a kind boss. Men who only think about business don't send flowers to their employee's mother or write handwritten notes. Valerie tried to argue that Gabriel was just being professional, taking care of a valuable employee. But Carmen shook her head. You can try to convince yourself of that, but I see it on your face when you talk about him. You're starting to feel something special for him too. And there's nothing wrong with that, my dear. Sometimes love shows up in the most unexpected places. That night, Gabriel couldn't sleep for even an hour. He lay in the huge bed feeling how empty and cold it seemed without Valerie's presence. He tried reading, watching television, and even took one of the sleeping pills he had kept for years, but nothing worked. Around 3 a.m., he got up and went to his office, where he worked until dawn, trying not to think about how accustomed he had become to her soft breathing beside him and the sense of security her presence brought. This is going too far, he muttered to himself, but deep down, he knew it was too late to control the feelings that were growing inside him. The next day, when Valerie called to say her mother had been discharged and she could return to work, Gabriel felt a relief so immense it surprised him. I'm glad your mother is better. You don't have to come in tonight if you want to stay home with her, he offered, trying to sound merely polite. Thank you for the concern, Mr. Mitchell, but she's fine and insists I don't miss work. I'll see you at 10:30 as usual. When Gabriel hung up the phone, he realized he was smiling for the first time in days, and this discovery left him even more confused about what was happening to him. That night, when Valerie entered the room and said good night in her soft voice, he felt as if he were finally home after a long journey. Carmen's hospitalization served as a turning point in Gabriel and Valerie's relationship. When she returned to work the following night, he asked in detail about her mother's health, showing a genuine interest that went far beyond professional courtesy. The doctor said she needs more frequent monitoring from now on, Valerie explained as they prepared for bed. Fortunately, with the salary from here, I can afford better health insurance for her. Gabriel was silent for a few moments before replying, If you need a recommendation for a private cardiologist, I know the best in the city. I can make the necessary calls. The offer was made naturally, but Valerie sensed there was real care behind his words. In the days that followed, their nightly conversations became more frequent and profound. Gabriel began to share small details about his business life, not the technical aspects, but how he felt about the responsibilities he carried. Sometimes I wonder if it was worth it, building this whole empire, he confessed one night, staring at the ceiling in the dark. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, but when I come home at night, it's always this empty silence waiting for me. Valerie turned her head slightly towards him, touched by the sincerity of his confession. But you have all your employees, the people who work with you. Doesn't that count as company? Gabriel let out a soft, joyless laugh. They work for me, Miss Santos. They respect my position, my money, my power, but not one of them would care if I simply disappeared tomorrow. The conversation revealed a side of Gabriel that Valerie had never imagined existed. Behind the facade of the successful, intimidating businessman was a profoundly lonely man who had built walls so high around his heart that even he couldn't tear them down anymore. I think you're being too hard on yourself, she said softly. Maybe the people around you want to get closer, but they don't know how because you always keep everyone at a distance. Gabriel thought about those words for a long time before answering. Maybe. But it's easier to keep my distance than to risk being disappointed by people or disappointing them. There was a vulnerability in that admission that made Valerie understand that Gabriel carried wounds far deeper than just the loss of his parents in childhood. A week later, Carmen had a follow-up appointment with the cardiologist, and Gabriel surprised Valerie by offering his private driver to take them to the hospital. "It's more comfortable than public transport, and your mother will arrive less tired for her appointment," he explained when she tried to refuse the offer. During the appointment, the doctor praised the improvement in Carmen's condition and said the new health insurance was allowing for much more effective monitoring. On the way back, Carmen held her daughter's hand and said softly, "That young man is taking care of you in a way that goes far beyond a job, my daughter. And from the look on your face when you talk about him, you're starting to take care of his heart, too." Valerie tried to deny it, but she knew her mother was right. Gabriel had become far more important in her life than he should be in a professional relationship. That night, when Gabriel asked about the doctor's appointment, Valerie told him all the details and thanked him again for his help with the transportation. "It was very kind of you, Mr. Mitchell. My mother was very impressed with your thoughtfulness." Gabriel blushed slightly, something Valerie had never seen happen before. "Your mother seems to be a very special person. It's clear where you inherited your kindness and determination." The compliment was said with a sincerity that made Valerie's heart race. It was the first time he had made a personal comment about her, and the way he said "you" instead of "Miss Santos" did not go unnoticed. "Can I confess something?" Gabriel asked after a few minutes of silence. Valerie nodded, though he couldn't see in the dark. "Since you started working here, I've slept better than I have in the last 27 years. But it's not just because someone is present in the room. It's because that someone is you." The confession left Valerie speechless. There was an intimacy in those words that completely changed the nature of their relationship. "Mr. Mitchell," she began, but he interrupted her gently. "Gabriel, when we're here alone, you can call me Gabriel." The name sounded different coming from his lips, closer, more real. "Gabriel," she repeated softly, testing how the word felt. "Thank you for telling me that. For me too. These weeks have meant more than I imagined possible." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken possibilities. They both knew they were crossing a line that separated the professional from the personal, but neither of them wanted to pull back. Gabriel turned slightly in bed, facing Valerie in the dark. "I know this might complicate our work situation," he said in a low voice, "but I need you to know that you've changed something fundamental in me. For the first time in years, I wake up in the morning and looking forward to the night." Valerie felt her heart beat so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Gabriel, I also feel that something has changed. You're not the person I imagined when I came to work here. You're so much more complex, more sensitive, more human than you let anyone see." They lay there in the dark, facing each other, with only a few inches of distance between them. The tension in the air was almost palpable, a mixture of desire, affection, and fear of the unknown. Gabriel slowly raised his hand, as if to touch Valerie's face, but stopped halfway. "I don't want you to feel pressured or uncomfortable. If this is moving too fast," he whispered. Valerie reached out her own hand and lightly touched his fingers. "It's not moving too fast. It's moving at the right time, for both of us." The simple touch of their fingers lacing together in the dark sealed something between them that they both knew there was no turning back from. That night, they fell asleep holding hands, and for the first time since she started working there, Valerie dreamed of Gabriel, not as her boss but as the man she was hopelessly falling in love with. The next morning brought a drastic change in Gabriel's behavior that left Valerie completely confused. When he woke up and saw they were still holding hands, he quickly pulled his fingers away and got out of bed with abrupt movements, avoiding all eye contact. "Good morning, Miss Santos," he said with cold formality, reverting to the distant treatment of the early days. "I hope you rested well." Valerie lay there watching him get ready in the bathroom with a haste he hadn't shown in weeks, and felt her heart sink at the sudden change in attitude. When Gabriel left the room without saying goodbye, she knew something had gone very wrong, but she couldn't understand exactly what. For the next few days, Gabriel returned to being the cold, distant man she had met in the first interview. He arrived in the room at exactly 11 p.m., greeted her with a formal nod and lay down, keeping as much distance as possible from her in the enormous bed. The nightly conversations disappeared completely, replaced by a tense silence that made the hours pass like entire days. When Valerie tried to initiate any casual conversation, Gabriel responded with monosyllables or simply pretended to be asleep. It was as if the intimate connection they had developed had been just a dream, and now she was waking up to a cold, impersonal reality. At the company office, Gabriel was also different, but this time his coldness extended to all employees. He went back to yelling for insignificant reasons, fired 2 employees for minor errors, and cancelled several important meetings, claiming to be unwell. Michael, who had known his boss for years, tried to broach the subject delicately. "Mr. Gabriel, is everything all right? The employees are commenting that you seem very tense lately." Gabriel looked up from his computer with an icy expression that made Michael take a step back. "My personal life is none of the employees' business, Michael. And I suggest you focus on your own responsibilities instead of listening to gossip." The harshness of the reply made it clear that Gabriel was fighting something much bigger than work stress. Valerie tried to understand what had happened to cause this radical change. She replayed every conversation in her mind, every moment of the night they had grown close, looking for anything that might have scared Gabriel or made him retreat. The only conclusion she reached was that he had regretted opening up emotionally and was now trying to return to what he considered a safe distance. During the day, when she was at home with Carmen, she found herself constantly thinking about Gabriel, worried about his emotional state and missing the conversations that had begun to brighten her nights. Carmen, with her wisdom as a woman who had lived a lot, immediately noticed something was wrong with her daughter. "My dear, you've been different this week. You seem worried about something that goes beyond work." Valerie tried to hide it, but ended up telling her mother about the closeness that had happened with Gabriel and how drastically he had changed his attitude afterward. I think he regretted showing feelings for me. Maybe he realized he was mixing work with his personal life and decided it wasn't appropriate." Carmen listened to everything in silence before giving her opinion. Or maybe he got scared of what he was feeling. Men who have lived their whole lives closed off to love, sometimes they panic when they realize they're genuinely falling for someone. On Thursday of that week, the tension between them reached a critical point. Gabriel was irritable while preparing for bed, scrolling through his phone with jerky movements and sighing constantly. When they finally lay down, he tossed and turned in bed for over an hour, clearly unable to relax. Valerie, who also couldn't sleep with all that tension in the air, decided to break the silence. "Gabriel, can I ask what's going on? If I did something wrong or said something that bothered you, I'd like to know so I can fix it." Gabriel lay still for a few seconds before answering, his voice tense. "Nothing is going on, Miss Santos. We are simply returning to the original terms of our professional agreement." The coldness of the reply hurt more than Valerie expected. "Original terms," she repeated, trying to keep her voice calm. "So all those conversations, all that closeness, it meant nothing to you?" Gabriel turned abruptly to face her in the dark, and even without being able to see clearly, she felt the intensity of his gaze. "It meant too much, and that's exactly the problem," he said, his voice laden with frustration. "I can't allow myself to feel these things for you. I can't allow myself to depend emotionally on another person again." The words came out with such evident pain that Valerie felt the urge to reach out and touch him, but she resisted. "Gabriel, no one is asking you to depend on me," she said softly. "I just want to understand why you suddenly decided we need to go back to being strangers." Gabriel was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and filled with a vulnerability he was trying to hide. "Because everyone important in my life has abandoned me, Valerie. My parents died and left me alone. My grandparents raised me as an obligation, not out of love. Every time I let myself get attached to someone, I end up suffering when that person leaves." The confession revealed the deep-seated fear behind all his coldness, and Valerie finally understood that Gabriel wasn't rejecting her specifically. He was protecting himself from the possibility of another devastating loss. "And who said I'm going to leave?" she asked softly, turning completely to face him. "Gabriel, I understand you're afraid after everything you've been through, but you can't live your whole life shielding yourself from feelings that could be good just because there's a possibility they might cause pain. Gabriel stared at her in the dark, visibly struggling with his own emotions. That's easier said than done, Valerie. I've spent years building these defenses because they keep me safe. The conversation left them both emotionally exhausted. But at least now Valerie understood that Gabriel's change in behavior came from fear, not a lack of feelings. It was a start. Perhaps they could find a way back to each other. The following days were marked by a tension that seemed to grow each night. Gabriel maintained his defensive posture, but Valerie could see his internal struggle intensifying. He slept poorly, woke up several times during the night, and sometimes she caught him looking in her direction when he thought she was asleep. During the day, the mansion staff whispered among themselves about the boss's increasingly unstable mood. He had resumed his angry outbursts over trivial matters. Michael even discreetly suggested it might be better to avoid bothering Gabriel with non-urgent issues until he calmed down. On Monday of a new week, the situation exploded unexpectedly. Valerie arrived at the mansion to find everyone on edge. One of the oldest gardeners, Mr. Johnson, who had worked there for over 15 years, was in the kitchen with red eyes, clearly upset. "What happened?" Valerie asked Michael, who was trying to calm the employee. "Mr. Gabriel fired Mr. Johnson this morning because some flowers in the front garden were wilted. He yelled at him in front of everyone and called him incompetent." Michael shook his head sadly. "Mr. Johnson's daughter is sick and he needs this job. I've never seen Mr. Gabriel be so cruel, not even on his worst days." When Gabriel arrived in the room that night, Valerie made a decision she knew might cost her job. Instead of lying down as she always did, she remained seated in the armchair near the window, waiting for him to finish his routine in the bathroom. When Gabriel came out and saw her still awake and dressed, he frowned with irritation. "Is there a problem, Miss Santos? It's past 11 o'clock. Valerie took a deep breath, gathering the courage to say what needed to be said. "Gabriel, we need to talk about what happened today with Mr. Johnson." His expression hardened immediately. "My employees are not your concern. I suggest you focus on your own responsibilities. Firing an honest man over wilted flowers has nothing to do with work, Gabriel. It has to do with you taking out the anger you feel at yourself on innocent people," Valerie said, keeping her voice firm despite her racing heart. Gabriel turned to her with an expression mixing surprise and fury. "How dare you judge me? You know nothing about running a company or making tough decisions." Valerie stood up from the armchair, facing him directly. "I know about being a decent human being, Gabriel, and I know that the man who talked to me all those weeks would never commit such cruelty against someone who has always been loyal to him." The words hit Gabriel like a punch, because he knew she was right. "You don't understand anything," Gabriel exploded, completely losing the control he always maintained. "I try to be cold and distant because it's the only way to survive in this world. When I let myself feel something, when I let people get close, I always get disappointed or I am disappointed." He was pacing the room, gesturing wildly. "Mr. Johnson has worked here for 15 years, and I never personally cared about him. Now, suddenly firing him made me feel guilty. You know why? Because you made me start to feel things again, and it's driving me crazy." The confession burst out with an intensity that surprised them both. Valerie approached him slowly, seeing the real pain behind all that anger. "Gabriel, feeling guilty for hurting someone isn't a weakness. It's a sign that you have a heart, even if you try to convince everyone otherwise." Gabriel stopped pacing and looked at her, his expression that of someone losing an internal battle. "I don't know how to do this, Valerie. I don't know how to let someone into my life without being terrified that they'll leave and leave me even more alone than I already am." The absolute vulnerability in those words broke Valerie's heart. She finally understood the depth of the fear Gabriel carried. "Gabriel, you can't live your whole life punishing yourself for things that happened when you were a child," she said softly, taking another step toward him. "Your parents didn't choose to die and leave you alone. It was a tragedy, not abandonment." Gabriel sat on the edge of the bed, covering his face with his hands. "But it hurts just the same, Valerie. It hurts as if they chose to leave me." And then my grandparents, they treated me like a burden, like I was a constant reminder of something they'd rather forget. For the first time since she'd known him, Valerie saw Gabriel cry, silent tears that streamed between his fingers. Without a second thought, Valerie knelt in front of him and gently pulled his hands away from his face, forcing him to look at her. "Gabriel, look at me," she whispered. "I'm not your parents. I'm not your grandparents. I'm not any of the people who hurt you in the past. I am me, and I am choosing to be here with you, not for money or obligation, but because I truly care about you." Gabriel looked into her eyes, seeing a sincerity that both terrified and consoled him. "How can I be sure you won't change your mind when you find out all my flaws, when you see how difficult and complicated I can be?" Valerie smiled faintly, wiping a tear from his cheek with her thumb. "Because I've already seen your flaws, Gabriel. I've seen you be cruel, cold, arrogant, and I'm still here." The moment of genuine connection between them was so intense that both were left breathless. Gabriel raised his hand and gently touched Valerie's face, as if checking to see if she was real. "I'm in love with you," he whispered, finally admitting what they had both known for weeks. "And it scares me more than any business deal or decision I've ever had to make in my life." Valerie covered his hand with hers, keeping his touch on her face. "I'm in love with you too, Gabriel. And yes, it's terrifying. But it's also the most beautiful thing that's ever happened to me." They stayed like that for several minutes, just looking at each other, processing the magnitude of what they had just confessed. Finally, Gabriel leaned in slowly and kissed Valerie. A soft kiss, full of all the feelings they had held back for weeks. It was a kiss that spoke of fear, hope, passion, and the promise that maybe, this time, love could be stronger than fear. When they parted, Gabriel rested his forehead against hers and whispered, "I'm going to rehire Mr. Johnson tomorrow. And I'm going to try to be the man you deserve, even if it means facing all my fears." Valerie smiled, feeling that they had finally found their way to each other, through all the barriers Gabriel had built around his heart. The next morning brought a complete transformation to the mansion's dynamic. Gabriel woke up early, and instead of rushing out of the room as he had for weeks, he stayed for a few minutes just watching Valerie sleep, a soft smile on his face that she had never seen before. When she woke up and found him there, looking at her with such affection, her heart filled with a happiness she didn't know was possible. "Good morning," he said softly, kissing her forehead lightly. "Did you sleep well?" It was a simple question, but loaded with a tenderness that showed how much everything had changed between them overnight. The first thing Gabriel did after breakfast was to call Mr. Johnson back for a private conversation. The gardener arrived at the mansion visibly nervous, perhaps expecting an argument over forgotten belongings or some termination formality. To his surprise, Gabriel received him in the office with a humility no one in the house had ever witnessed. "Mr. Johnson, I made a terrible mistake yesterday. You have been an exemplary employee for 15 years, and I fired you for a reason that made no sense." Gabriel stood up and approached the older man. "I would like to offer you your job back with a 20% salary increase, and I sincerely apologize for the way I treated you." Mr. Johnson was dumbfounded by the proposal, but what surprised him most was the sincerity in Gabriel's apology. "Mr. Gabriel, of course I accept. But may I ask what changed?" Gabriel smiled, that new smile Valerie had taught him. "Someone very special reminded me that being powerful doesn't mean being cruel to the people who trust me. You've always taken care of this house as if it were your own, and I should have valued that instead of taking my personal frustration out on your work." The conversation marked the beginning of a profound change in how Gabriel related to everyone around him. Over the following days, the mansion staff began to comment on the incredible transformation in their boss's behavior. Gabriel greeted each of them by name in the morning, asked about their families, and even offered help when he learned Michael's daughter needed expensive surgery. "It's like Mr. Gabriel woke up from a bad dream and finally remembered how to be human," the cook commented to the other staff. Michael, who had known his boss the longest, knew exactly the cause of this change. "It's love," he said with certainty. Mr. Gabriel is in love, and it's healing wounds he's carried for years. Gabriel and Valerie's nights also changed completely. They began to talk for hours before sleeping, sharing dreams, fears, plans for the future, and all the little things that people in love want to know about each other. Gabriel told her about his childhood before the tragedy, revealing a happy and affectionate boy that Valerie could only imagine through his stories. She talked about her plans to get a postgraduate degree in pediatric cardiology, inspired by her experience with her mother, and Gabriel listened to every word as if they were the most important secrets in the world. A week after their reconciliation, Gabriel made a decision that surprised even himself. During one of their nightly conversations, he held Valerie's hand and said, in an emotional voice, "I want you to meet my parents." Valerie was confused, knowing they had died many years ago. "Gabriel, I don't understand," he smiled, squeezing her hand. "Tomorrow morning I want to take you to the cemetery where they're buried. I've never taken anyone there. Not even my grandparents went with me after the funeral. But I want you to meet the people who gave me life, and I want to tell them about the woman who taught me how to live again." The visit to the cemetery was a deeply emotional moment for both of them. Gabriel brought white flowers, his mother's favorite, and stood in silence for a few minutes before the side-by-side headstones. When he finally spoke, his voice was full of love and longing. "Mom, Dad, I brought someone very special for you to meet. This is Valerie, the woman who made me remember that you taught me to love before you left." He looked at Valerie with moist eyes. "She brought me back to life. And I know you would be happy to know that I finally found someone who makes me want to be a better person every day." Valerie cried with him, understanding that this moment represented Gabriel finally making peace with his past. That night, when they returned to the mansion, something different happened. For the first time since they met, Gabriel and Valerie kissed with the passion of two people who were no longer afraid of their feelings. The kiss evolved naturally into more intimate caresses, and they gave themselves to each other completely, with love, care, and a connection that went far beyond the physical. Gabriel was extremely careful and attentive, treating Valerie as if she were made of precious crystal, and she reciprocated with all the tenderness she felt for this man, who had become more important than the air she breathed. The next morning, Gabriel woke up before Valerie and lay there, watching her sleep nestled in his arms. For the first time in 27 years, he had slept through the entire night. No nightmares, no insomnia, no fear. Just peace, security, and a love so deep he could hardly believe it was real. When Valerie woke up and found him looking at her with that smile that had become her new favorite thing in the world, she knew they had definitively crossed the line into the rest of their lives. "Gabriel," she whispered, lightly touching his face, "I love you." He kissed the palm of her hand and replied with all the sincerity in his heart, "I love you too, Valerie. More than I ever thought possible to love anyone." 2 weeks later, during a walk through the mansion's gardens, which Gabriel now made a point of showing her personally, he stopped in front of the fountain, where the sunlight created small rainbows in the water. Kneeling on one knee, he took a small velvet box from his pocket and looked up at Valerie, his eyes shining with emotion. "Valerie Santos, you taught me that love is not something to be feared, but to be celebrated. You turned my house into a home, my life into an adventure, and my heart into an inexhaustible source of happiness." He opened the box, revealing a delicate ring with a diamond that reflected all the colors of the rainbow. "Will you marry me and give me the honor of sleeping by your side for the rest of my life?" Valerie's answer didn't need words. The tears of happiness streaming down her face and the passionate kiss she gave Gabriel told him everything he needed to know. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes, I want to marry you and build a life where we can take care of each other forever." Gabriel slid the ring onto her finger with hands trembling with emotion, and they both laughed when they realized they were crying with joy, like two children who had just received the best gift of their lives. Carmen, who was watching from the living room window with Michael and other staff members, was also crying, knowing her daughter had found not only true love, but someone who valued her exactly as she deserved. The wedding took place 3 months later, in a simple but deeply emotional ceremony in the mansion's gardens. Gabriel insisted that all the employees attend as special guests, not as staff, because he now understood that these people were an important part of his life. Mr. Johnson was chosen as the best man, a decision that moved the gardener to tears. Carmen, radiant with happiness and in visibly better health, was the one who walked Valerie down the aisle improvised under the garden's ancient tree. "Take good care of my daughter's heart," she whispered to Gabriel when she placed Valerie's hand in his, "and let her take care of yours too." During the vows, Gabriel spoke with a sincerity that touched the hearts of everyone present. "Valerie, you came into my life when I was lost in a darkness I thought would never end. You taught me that vulnerability is not weakness, that love is not dependence, and that sleeping well isn't just about closing your eyes, but about having peace in your heart." His voice cracked slightly as he continued. "I promise to love you every day of my life. I promise to be the man you helped me become, and I promise that I will never try to face life alone again, because now I know we have each other." Valerie wiped the tears from his face before saying her own vows, promising to be by his side, not just during sleep, but in all the moments life would bring. The honeymoon was spent on a quiet farm in the countryside, far from business and responsibilities, where Gabriel finally learned to relax completely. They spent their days walking through fields, talking about everything and nothing, and their nights discovering new ways to show the love they felt for each other. Gabriel slept like a tired child after a happy day, nestled in Valerie's arms, without any trace of the insomnia that had tormented him for so many years. "It's amazing how love can heal wounds we didn't even know existed," he commented one morning, watching the sunrise from the cottage porch. Valerie kissed his shoulder and agreed, knowing they had both found something far more precious than romance. They had found mutual healing. When they returned to the city, Gabriel implemented significant changes in his company that reflected his new perspective on life. He created an expanded medical assistance program for all employees, implemented more flexible hours for parents, and established a support fund for workers' personal emergencies. "A company is only strong when it takes care of the people who make it run," he explained to the directors, who were surprised by the changes. Valerie, in turn, decided to use part of her new financial stability to pursue the postgraduate degree in pediatric cardiology she had always dreamed of, with Gabriel's full support. He transformed one of the mansion's spare rooms into a perfect office for her to study. 6 months after the wedding, on a particularly quiet night, Gabriel and Valerie were lying in their bed, talking about plans to expand their family, when he made an observation that showed how profoundly he had changed. "You know, I used to think I needed you just to sleep, but now I realize I need you to live fully. You're not just the person who gives me peace at night, you're the person who makes every day worth living." Valerie smiled, stroking his hair as he rested his head in her lap. "And you taught me that true love isn't just about grand romantic gestures, but about choosing to care for each other every day, especially in the simplest moments." Gabriel's transformation became a legend at the company and among all who knew him. The man once known for his coldness and cruelty was now respected for his compassionate leadership and the way he treated every person with dignity. Michael, who was now considered more of a friend than an employee, always told anyone who would listen that Valerie's love had worked a miracle in Gabriel's life. "She didn't change who he was inside," Michael would explain. "She just brought back the good man who was always there, hidden behind fear and pain." Years passed and Gabriel never had another single night of insomnia, not because Valerie was physically beside him, but because he had finally found inner peace. They built a loving family. They had children who grew up seeing their father as an example of gentle strength and unconditional love, and they grew old together, like two people who knew they had found their right place in the world. On quiet nights, when the children were already asleep and the house was silent, Gabriel and Valerie still talked, just as they did at the beginning, sharing dreams, fears, joys, and the deep gratitude for having found in each other the cure for a loneliness they didn't even know they carried. On one of those nights, now with gray hair and expression lines that told the story of decades of shared smiles, Gabriel held Valerie's hand and whispered the words that had become his nightly prayer. "Thank you for teaching me that love is the only thing that truly matters in life. Thank you for giving me the family I always wanted, but never believed I deserved. And thank you for teaching me how to dream again." Valerie kissed his lips softly and replied, as she always did, "Thank you for showing me that sometimes the best destinations are hidden in the most unexpected places." And so they lived, proving to everyone around them that true love is not just a romantic story, but a daily choice to care, to forgive, to grow together, and to find in each other the best version of oneself. Gabriel never slept alone again, not because he needed company to beat insomnia, but because he had built a life so full of love that loneliness simply had no place left in his existence. This is a story about healing, hope, and the transformative power of true love. Gabriel teaches us that even the most wounded hearts can learn to love again when they find the right person. Valerie shows us that sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is simply our genuine, unconditional presence. The story reminds us that we all carry wounds from the past, but those wounds do not have to define our future. Patient and true love has the power to heal deep traumas and transform lives completely. If this story touched your heart, leave a like. Subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories, and share this with someone who needs to believe that true love still exists. Comment below which part of the story moved you the most. I love reading every one of your comments. May God bless each of you with much love, peace, and happiness.